Mrs. Sandisiwe as a Senior Assistant Director of Institutional Recruitment at the University of Pretoria. And she's here to talk to you about that difficult part that Onraba mentioned at the end of his presentation, how important those very, very last year of your high school studies are, you know, your prelims, your final exam results, what sets you apart from the rest of the applicants and that sort of thing. This is a session you really want to pay attention to. You don't want to get that "we regret" letter from a course of your dreams, or from university of your dreams, because you didn't pay attention to these important tips. We're going to hand over to Ms. Sandisiwe. Hello, how are you today?
Good evening, Oloto. I'm well, thank you. How are you? Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, we can hear and see you. Thank you for being so patient with us. I'm going to waste no time. I'm going to hand straight over to you, all right?
That's no problem. Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone. I just want to share my screen. If I could just be allowed to share the screen, it's not allowing me to share.
But Luvugo, are you able to make Mrs. Sandisiwe a co-host quickly? Let's just give him a moment.
No problem.
How inspiring is that? Yes,
right.
She's ready. She just needs you to
so
help her be co-host. There we go.
All right, we are live. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Sandisiwe Williams. I am originally from the Eastern Cape, not too far from where Onwaba is from, born and bred in the Eastern Cape. Just a brief background. I studied at the university, well, Nelson Mandela University is where I did my first qualification. And then I proceeded to do a BCom honors in marketing management from Mancosa. And then now I'm currently, as Oluto has mentioned, I'm pursuing a master's in business administration with Nelson Mandela University. It is a privilege for me to be invited, and thank you to the committee for having me this evening. I am passionate about what I'm going to talk to you guys about. I eat and breathe this thing. So I'm hoping that the information that I have for you is going to assist in terms of my background, in terms of work. So I started within this industry. I traditionally was in the media industry. And then I started working for an institution called Stend in South Africa, which is based in Port Alfred. Its main campus is situated in the Netherlands in Leeuwarden. I then moved to Monash, South Africa, here in Gauteng, and worked there as a senior student advisor. I then went to Wits and worked at the University of Witwatersrand, and Wits does give you the edge. That's the slogan at the University of Witwatersrand. And now currently I'm the senior assistant director at the University of Pretoria. And my portfolio basically deals with career guidance. It deals with recruitment for undergrad as well as postgrad. So I'm hoping that the information that I have for you is going to be pertinent and you're going to take some notes. I'm just going to be sharing some general information, and then I will be going into depth, especially with regards to the various grades in terms of things that you need to be cognizant of as a high school pupil. Now, in South Africa, we have 26 public universities. We also have, we have 26 public universities and 56 TVET colleges. I'm going to explain to you within my presentation the various higher education institution types that we have in the country and how they actually differ. And I'm sure there are people who are watching this evening who are looking at some of these institutions and thinking, that's where I'm going, that's where I'm going. Just a side note, my dream was to go study journalism at Rhodes University, but Nelson Mandela University gave me a scholarship. So that's where I ended up, because in terms of pricing, NMU was much better, but I don't regret my decision. So I want to start off by just sharing some information in terms of how the education structure within South Africa looks like. So in South Africa, we've got 10 NQF levels. Now, an NQF stands for the National Qualifications Framework. NQF starts from grade 9. So if you're currently in grade 9 now, it means that you're NQF level 1. If you meet anyone who's a doctor and has done a PhD, that's a person who's actually completed all the NQF levels and is currently has completed an NQF level 10, which is the highest NQF. After that, there are people who go into postdoctoral studies and so forth, and people who are called professors. There's always that conversation to say, what's the highest? Is it professorship or is it a PhD? A PhD is basically the highest. Professorship, there's just other things that people need to do, but I won't dwell too much on that. What I'm also going to talk about in terms of my presentation today is the various levels. So, for example, just to be cognizant of certain factors, I do know that I'm speaking to a cohort who's got an average of 75%. So passing with a D or passing with an H in grade 12 is not something that I expect from this cohort. But just to sort of know this information is very important in terms of how you pass matric, what your level, what the exit levels look like, what an NQF level 7 is, what it requires. And I hope that everyone who's in the session right now is going to pass grade 12 with a bachelor's, meaning that they will then go into an NQF level 7. But what I must emphasize on is that there's a lot of people who think that passing grade 12 with a B means that you go automatically and you meet the requirements to study a bachelor's qualification, and that's not the case. There are certain things that we look at in higher education that need to meet certain requirements outside of you passing with a bachelor's. So it's not good enough just passing with a bachelor's. There are other things that we look at in order to give you that acceptance to the university. But as the presentation goes ahead, I will go and I will be explaining all of that. So yes, in South Africa, this is how our framework works. We have 10 NQF levels. In terms of higher education providers, so we've got traditional universities. So Onwaba, for example, is studying at a traditional university. I work at a traditional university. There's 26 traditional universities in South Africa. Then we also have universities of technology. The difference between a traditional university like a WITS and the difference between a WITS and a DUT or CPUT or a TUT is the qualifications that they offer. So you find that in many public universities, there's not many certificates or higher certificates or diplomas. But at a University of Technologies level, that's where you actually get diplomas, you get BTECs, there are degrees as well there, and there are even masters and PhDs as well. So universities of technology, the argument could be that they have a bigger scope in terms of what they actually provide for those who want to go into and study and progress in higher education and training. And also, in terms of traditional universities, it's a lot of theory, so it's research based, and there's a lot of academic work that's done there. Whereas at universities of technology, there's a split. So you've got practicals that you do, but there's also theory as well. And then we've also got TVET colleges in South Africa. So things like Ekurhuleni West, you've got False Bay, me being from the Eastern Cape, you've got Lovedale, you've got, if you're from Epai, there's what is that one? Russell Road College. If you're from East London, there's East London College. So all of those are TVET colleges, and TVET colleges give vocational qualifications. Now, vocational qualifications basically mean that it's more practical than what it is of theory. And then we've got your private institutions in South Africa. So your private institutions include your varsity colleges, your Bostons, what else is there? Richfield. There's many other private providers. I do want to mention, though, that the South Africa structure in terms of funding, which I'm going to get to later in my presentation, if you're looking at getting funding or applying funding for NSFAS, we all know what NSFAS is, right? All right. So if you're looking for funding and you want to apply for funding for university studies when it comes to NSFAS, NSFAS does not fund private institutions. NSFAS only funds public institutions in South Africa. So they fund your traditional universities, they fund your TVETs, and they fund your universities of technology. It's very, very important that you keep that in mind, because what happens is that you find that students, some don't apply to university, then they pass so well, and then they have to go to private institutions, but then there's no money for them to go to private institutions. So then what happens is that they can't progress with their studies because, well, they didn't plan properly, and because NSFAS does not fund private institutions. So please just make a note of that and just remember that. Also, in terms of the structure in South Africa, There are various curriculums. So you just heard from the lovely lady, Ulindelwa, that she was doing I think she said A levels. A levels is basically part of the Cambridge curriculum. So in South Africa, we've got various curriculums that we have. So majority of the students or majority of schools currently in terms of the public space are doing CAPS. What CAPS is basically is the National Senior Certificate. So meaning that when you pass grade 12, you will get a Malusi certificate because you have done the National Senior Certificate. You've got students who are currently doing the IEB, which is your private schools, and that's also from grade 1 to grade 12. I'm sure you've heard, or if you're ever amazed during the time when we get results and you hear that there are students who got nine distinctions or 10 distinctions, and you're thinking to yourself, but how is that possible? Because you only have 7 subjects. Many IEB schools actually do afford their top achievers the opportunity to take more than 7 subjects. So they take 8 or 9 subjects. But because we are universities, because they're a public entity, we treat all incoming cohorts exactly the same. So whether you've done 9 subjects or whether you've done 7 subjects, we only calculate a certain amount of subjects, and it's exactly the same whether you've been to a private school or whether you've been to a public school. And then we also have TVET. So another interesting point that some people may not know is that after grade 9, you actually have an opportunity. Some people don't want to progress with traditional high school, so they go into TVET colleges where then they do vocational qualifications, which is also like a grade 10, 11, and 12. And some can actually do that. It does become a bit difficult to articulate into university studies, but it becomes easier to articulate to universities of technology should you choose to go via the TVET vocational route from grade 10, 11, and 12. So that's basically just some general information regarding the different curriculums that we have in South Africa. I'm now going to go into the specific grades that I want to speak to in terms of what you need to be cognizant of. So I understand that in the session today, we've got grade 8s and 9s. So grade 8 are those who've just entered high school. Well, you've had about 8, 9 months into high school now. And at grade 9, for the grade 9s that are in the session, grade 9 is a important year because at grade 9, that is when you need to choose your subject. So many schools during this time, August, September, October, that is when you actually do your selection for your subject choices. I'm going to give you guys some information which is very, very important. If you're currently in grade 9, if you're currently in grade 8, please take note of what I'm about to say regarding your subject choices. Now, many schools, in fact, majority of them, especially in the public space, will allow you to choose 7. Well, you choose 7 subjects. Of those 7 subjects, there's 4 compulsory subjects, okay? So your compulsory subjects include your home language. Your home language could be English, it could be Xhosa, it could be Spade, it could be Zulu, it could be Afrikaans. And then you then choose your first additional language, all right? Now, English has to be either one. English either has to be the home language or English has to be the first additional language, right? Because when it comes to university entrance, we look at English. English is a prerequisite when it comes to subjects that you need to have. Then there's mathematics or there's mathematical literacy. Now, there's always a debate between mathematics and mathematical literacy, and those who take mathematics sometimes mock those who are taking mathematical literacy. Just to explain the difference, mathematical literacy has more comprehension to it than what mathematics has. So what mathematics is basically numbers. It's finding the square root to whatever. Find the square root to X or however it is. And then you've got mathematical literacy. Mathematical literacy tells a story. Mathematical literacy will say, person X is moving from Gauteng to Limpopo, driving at 200 kilometers an hour. Each 200 kilometers takes 3 liters of petrol, and the distance to Limpopo is 600 kilometers. How much petrol will that be? So you can see that when we talk about mathematical literacy, we're literally talking about it's a comprehension, right? There's context to mathematical literacy. And then life orientation is the last compulsory subject that you need to take. So those are the 4 core modules of subjects, that you need to take. Also, I must just mention that there's sometimes a lot of misinformation in the market. So for example, a student who wants to study accounting at university level, there's always a narrative that says you must have done accounting at a high school level in order for you to progress and do accounting at a university level. As much as it's important to know the basics of accounting, but no university in South Africa looks at your accounting marks for you to get into accounting. They look at your English and they look at your math, at your mathematics. So that's also very important to note. You've got students who take all the sciences and decide that they want to do business, but they never did business in high school. That is not going to discredit you for going into that business faculty or that EMS faculty once you get to university. Yes, it's important to know the basics, but it's not a prerequisite, especially if you meet the required subjects and you also meet the percentages within those subjects. Okay, so just a few steps and guidelines in terms of choosing your subjects, grade 9s. Here's a few things that I think are very important. The first one is that do your research, and there are many free services online where you can do an aptitude test. So I've shared some examples that I also use when I have one-on-one consultations with students. There's the Department of Higher Education and Training has the site called KETA, where you can log in. It is free, and you can take a career questionnaire or career test, and it gives you after you've answered a bunch of questions, it will then give you a guideline in terms of what it is that it thinks based on your answers you should go into. Also, Career Explorer, which is funded by Investec. You can also take there's a career questionnaire there that you can also take, and it might lead you into the right direction. All right. But what I also need to just emphasize is that when you're choosing your subjects, you need to work in reverse. What I mean by that, you first need to think about what career you want to go into before you choose those subjects. You've got situations where someone, again, would want to become a dentist, for example. Now, dentistry in universities needs pure maths, it needs physics. Some institutions also need life sciences, and it also needs what? It's physics or life sciences, English, as well as pure mathematics. You find then that a student will not take physics, or they will not take life sciences, right? But they want to progress and go do dentistry or want to get into health sciences. But because you don't have those prerequisite subjects, you will not be able to get into that qualification. If, for example, you want to become a chartered accountant, right? And you don't take pure maths and you take mathematical literacy. Yes, perhaps let's say you get 80s and 90s for mathematical literacy, but you still don't meet the requirements because you didn't take that prerequisite subject. So you need to work in reverse. First, understand what career you want to go into, then look at what the requirements are and choose those subjects accordingly. Okay. Also consider your strengths, balance your passion and practicality. There is no it's not practical to know that you're sitting currently now at grade 9 with physics or physical sciences, and you're sitting at an average of 40% and you want to do physics in high school. I mean, well, in grade 10, 11, and 12. There are instances where we've seen that some students progress and they do very well. But the moment you take a subject that you know that there's a high risk that you might not do well in, it has the potential of dropping your APS score. I'm going to get to what an APS score is and how that is calculated. Also, then avoid peer pressure. What we've seen a lot with high school learners, especially in grade 10 and in grade 9, is that because my friends are doing economics, or because my friends are doing geography, or because my friends are doing pure maths, or because my friends are doing mathematical literacy, I'm going to do that as well. Whereas then you know that your marks actually don't speak to that, to your strengths, and your marks don't speak to that. So avoid peer pressure, take a decision. This is where decisions start happening. This is when you have to start taking decisions that benefit yourself. And I know parents that are in the session, parents always have an issue when I say this. Allow your children to take the decisions, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to affect them personally. And then job shadowing. If you have an opportunity to do some job shadowing, maybe your mom or your dad or your aunt or your granny knows someone who's in that field, ask to job shadow, even if it's for a day. I've got a lot of students, for example, who want to go into law. And you find that when it comes to reading, they don't have the patience for reading. So when you are a lawyer, there's a lot of extensive reading and there's a lot of case law that you need to do. You've got students who want to become doctors. At university level, when you're doing an MPCHB, in your first year, you're just doing normal subjects like physics and whatnot. But when you get to your second year, that's when you go to the morgue. You work in the morgue. You are working on dead bodies. You are working with patients. There's blood. Then students find that no, they can't handle blood, therefore they want to change. So it's very, very important to be cognizant of those things. I'm now going to talk about the APS. Does anyone know what APS stands for? It's written there, but hopefully someone is not looking and they just know. Anyone who wants to answer what APS stands for? Just for some interaction?
Admission point scores, ma'am.
Correct. That is correct. That's an admission point score. Now, parents, just to also educate you in terms of what this means, you know, when your child comes home with their report, there's always the subject, then there's the percentage. Next to that percentage, there's always a level. That level is what universities count to calculate your child's APS score. And that is what an APS score means. So, for example, at WITS, if you want to go into chemical engineering, your prerequisite subjects are English, physics, as well as pure mathematics. All of those subjects must be sitting at above 70%, for example, right? Outside of that, you also need to meet an APS of, I think it's 42. So all of these things need to comply together for you to actually meet those particular requirements. And that is what will allow you or your child entrance into that particular faculty. So it's very, very important that you understand how the APS works, that you familiarize yourself with the calculations as well. If you're currently in grade 11 now, this is something that you should be doing every single term when you get your marks to calculate your APS. Because many universities, when it comes to your grade 11 final results, that is what we want when it comes to applying. And if you do poorly in your grade 11, guys, final, and you do well in your first term, grade 12, we're still not going to take your first term grade 12 results. Many institutions, especially the top 4 in South Africa, want your grade 11 final results. If you're listening to me now and you're in grade 12 and you know that your grade 11 is not that great, look, what's done is done, and we can try and rescue it some way or the other. And I'll be talking about how we can actually do that. So it's very important for you to know how this rubric actually works in terms of APS calculations. Okay, so I'm now going to just speak to my grade 10s and 11s in terms of what we actually look at. So there are 3 things, grade 10s, 11s, and 12s, that we are looking for when it comes to entrance into university. You need to obviously pass with the bachelor's. Once you pass with the bachelor's, there are prerequisite subjects that we want, okay? Now, for humanities, if there's anyone here who wants to go into psychology, or anyone who wants to go into education, or if there's anyone who wants to go into drama, or anyone who wants to go into journalism, the Faculty of Humanities in majority of the universities only require a bachelor's pass and an English mark over 60%. Whereas if you're going to go into engineering, if you're going to go into health sciences, those faculties are going to require pure maths, they're going to require physics, and they're going to require English. Some of those qualifications might require your English to be at 60, but and then your physics and maths above 70%. I'll give you an example. LLB. LLB, a lot of people want to become lawyers. I don't know if it's maybe the black gowns that people wear and that people think it's flashy. But there obviously is a big market in terms of lawyers. But an LLB requires the highest APS. Your English for LLB, just a requirement, your English must be above 70%. If your English is sitting at 69.999, they don't even round it off. If you're sitting at 69, you've not met the requirements. So you need to make those requirements. So those are the kind of things that you need to be cognizant of. I've made an example here. It was for chemical engineering. Chemical engineering at all of these various institutions, UCT, WITS, UP, and Stellenbosch University, these are the requirements that they look at. So you also need to be very aware of what it is that you want to study and what institution requires. Onwaba spoke about actuarial sciences. Actuarial sciences at WITS University requires English, maths, and physics. Actuarial sciences at UCT requires English and mathematics only. So universities also differ. So it's very important for you to look at those things so that you can plan accordingly. The other thing I want to bring your attention to is the NBTs. Not all universities require NBTs. It's UCT requires an NBT, and an NBT is an NBT test that you take. It's a test that they look at what you will write when you're in grade 12 to sort of benchmark where you are regarding your understanding of mathematics as well as English. WITS requires NBTs for 2 qualifications. The University of Pretoria doesn't require NBTs. Stellenbosch doesn't require any NBTs. No other institution requires NBTs. For those who are currently in grade 10 now, when you look at your marks, and there are certain subjects that you can see that you're not going to make it with in terms of your 60s, your 70s, and your 80s. All right. You need to, in terms of your, if you're in grade 10 and there are subjects that you're not too sure of, and because you know that you want to get, the best average, grade 10, guys, is the best time for you to swap subjects. Grade 10 is the best time for you to change your subjects, because when you get to grade 11, it becomes difficult for you to change subjects. So if you're in grade 10 now, there are certain subjects that you see that they're taking. Let's try and look at something else that we can get into, because the risk you run is that you might find, for example, I deal with a lot of students who've got 7 subjects, but out of the 7 subjects, only 4 of them are sitting at a level 6 or 7. And then you find that there's 2 that is sitting at a level 5. What that does is that it brings down your overall mark. So we need to be cognizant of that. And when you do those APS calculations, it's very, very important that you actually keep that in mind. Also at grade 11, as mentioned, it's a very important year. So grade 11s who are currently in the session, universities, mainly the top universities, are going to want you to apply with your grade 11 final results. All right. And then these are some of the things for the grade 12s. By the time you get to grade 12, you must be aware and you must know where you want to go. And I always say apply early so that you focus on your academics in grade 12. The grade 12 year is not about trying to think about which university I want to go to. In grade 12, when applications open, many universities open around the 1st of April. WITS opens on the 1st of April. I think UCT, UP also opens around the 1st of April. Many other institutions, some institutions open a bit later. Make sure that when it comes to all of that, everything of yours is sorted. You know where you want to go. You know the applications that you want to submit. You know how much they cost. All right. And you've made plans for you to be able to submit those applications, so that when you get to your June exams, you have literally, not that you've forgotten, but you are cognizant of the fact that you are going to university next year, but it's not a stress of yours because you've put all the plans into place. So the other thing, when it comes to choosing universities, like I said, we've got 26 public institutions in South Africa. There are certain things that you need to be cognizant of and to keep in mind. So admission requirements is one of the most important things. Programs that are offered. So who knows what the top university in South Africa is? Anybody? Yes, Musang.
Wits.
Okay, what is number 2?
It's the University of Cape Town.
Yes, it's the University of Cape Town. So the University of Cape Town is number 1. But the other thing that I need to just mention is that there's obviously a ranking that goes, and we look at, the universities. I will tell you now, in terms of rankings, UJ and UKZN are giving the top institutions in South Africa a run for their money. You also just need to look at which institutions specialize in what qualifications. So, for example, at the University of Pretoria, the law school at the University of Pretoria, I think, is ranked as number 4 in South Africa. But in terms of their law school, they are the number 1 law school on the African continent. So that's the other thing that you need to research about, is to say, yes, UCT might be number 1, WITS might be number 2, but in my field that I want to get into, which institution is the leading institution in that, okay? Then you look at things like location and campus life, funding, which I'm going to go into as well, reputation and accreditation. There's a lot of things when it comes to accreditations. For example, University of Pretoria, I'm going to refer a lot to University of Pretoria. There's accreditations that the university has with international role players, like the engineering department, whereas the engineers are not just accredited in South Africa, but they're accredited internationally as well. So engineers can work internationally and they can also work in South Africa. You look at your APS selection as well as your selection methods. Career support, all universities actually have career officers. So once you actually get in, there's what we call wraparound support. When you're a first-year student, there's what we call wraparound support, which you receive also during your orientation, just to also assist you in planning for the future. Because when you start your first year, you're also looking, we want to conscientize you to look at postgraduate studies. We also want to conscientize you as looking into what you're actually going to go into regarding your career. And then obviously personal fit when it comes to, class sizes, teaching styles, things like language. Where do you think you will fit well? And it's contrary to popular belief, but being uncomfortable and being far away from home could actually be one of the best things that you can actually do for yourself when it comes to university studies. We all have different beliefs and understandings of this, but it's, for me, I always say, look where you can go that's a bit further away from home, because university is not just about academia, but creating a whole holistic person that not only is an academic, but also when it comes to real life, they can adapt well to that. All right. And the various passes that we get in grade 12. Now, just by a show of like hands, you guys have seen how some people pass with B's and some people pass with D's and some people pass with H, right? So there's actually a system on how that works, but everybody that's in this session will pass grade 12 with a B. And what that actually means, there's actually a calculation and some sort of like math that is done in order to establish that. So when you pass grade 12 with a bachelor's, it means that your home language is above 50% and 4 of your subjects are above 50%. That does not include life orientation, okay? Those who pass with a diploma pass, it basically means that you've passed your home language with 40% and above and 3 subjects above 40%. Those who pass with an H in grade 12, which is a high certificate, means that you've passed your home language with 30% and 30% in 3 subjects. Now, those who pass with a diploma cannot go and study a bachelor's qualification, all right? Those who pass with a high certificate can't go and study a diploma, nor can they go study a bachelor's, all right? If you pass grade 12, and you can share this with some of your friends, if you pass grade 12 with an H, it means that you need to study a high certificate. So therefore, you'd go to a TVET, or one would go to a University of Technology. If you've passed with a diploma, it means that you can either go into diploma studies or you can even go into high certificate. When you pass with a bachelor's qualification, like I said earlier, a bachelor's pass does not mean that you're automatically qualified to go and study the bachelor's degree that you want to get into, because there are other requirements that we need to look at. That's the compulsory subjects, and that's the percentages within those subjects. So you need to be cognizant and remember that as you go forth and you prepare for your university studies. And I think in terms of funding, I don't know how much time I have. In terms of funding, okay.
Don't stress about the time. Sorry, Sandisiwe. Don't stress about the time. We came to you a little bit late. I'm sure the FGLers will give us some grace because this is such critical information. And also, I would like the FGLers to stick around for any questions and answers, pretty please.
All right, guys, funding. Now, when I speak to my high school learners, I always say, you alone know the circumstance at home. You alone know if there's money for you to go to university or if there's no money for you to go to university. And you start planning for that in high school. Now, NSFAS, which is the government and public funding, has a cap. NSFAS does not fund more than, if the household income is more than 350,000 a year. So household could be mom, dad, or just dad, or granny, or uncle, or sister, or whatever it is. If the income is more than 350,000, all right, you might not qualify for NSFAS. And I'm saying might, and I'm going to explain why. So the government has also done, in the recent years, there's a missing middle that the government is focusing on. What missing middle is you are at home, the income is more than 350,000 per year, but the demands are so much at home that mom or dad or uncle or grandma can't afford university. Maybe there's 3 of you guys going to university. So the department the Department of Higher Education and Training then said, we want to support those missing middles. Now, in my day, if you are studying via NSFAS, you would have to pay NSFAS back. Nowadays, you don't have to pay NSFAS back. All right. So it is very important that you keep that in mind in terms of how NSFAS works. NSFAS's portal usually opens in September. So if you're in grade 12 currently now, NSFAS is either open or it's going to open. There are certain documents that you need to put together to make sure that your application is ready for NSFAS. NSFAS, you apply online. So let's take a break, grade 12s, from TikTok and whatnot, and let's use our data for something important, like doing our NSFAS applications, all right? And then you've got other bursary opportunities as well, like ISFAP. ISFAP is also there. You can also Google that. There's Funza Lushaka. For those who want to go into education, there's Funza Lushaka. You can find some more information on graduates24.com and also Study Trust as well. These are just some of the platforms that you can access that can help you in terms of your applications. Also, the other thing is universities award top students. I'll give you an example. At the University of Pretoria, if you have an average between 80 and 90, you will be awarded 18,000. That 18,000 is enough to cover your registration as well as registration for res. So imagine now having that average that's above 80%, where your family doesn't have to worry about registration because registration is already taken care of. That money doesn't come to you physically, that money goes straight into your student account. If your average is above 90%, you get 48,000 into your account. Again, the stress of registration fee for the beginning of the year is something that you don't worry about because the money goes straight into your account. Also, for students who do, for example, physics, and you've got an 80% and above for physics, we give you an extra 2,000. For if you're doing pure mathematics and you get 80% and above for pure mathematics, it's another 2,000. So altogether, you could actually, based on your academic performance, be awarded a certain amount of money. Also, WITS works exactly the same way. UCT also works exactly the same way. In fact, majority of universities work exactly the same way. That's why I mentioned earlier why I went to Nelson Mandela University, because I was one of those students who was afforded that opportunity where they actually paid for my registration amount, which lessened the stress on my grandmother because I was raised by my grandmother, and she had to take care of me. And fortunately for her, I was a bright spark. Yeah, so the other thing that we must consider is careers of the future. So we are currently moving into the fifth industrial revolution now. What law looks like today is not going to be what it's going to look like by the time you are in the field. So there's a lot of things that one needs to also look at. With a lot of students, especially beginning of this year, there's a lot of them who want to go into technology and digital innovation, which is great. And things like coding have become big. What we've noticed, though, in the industry of higher education and training is that there are now AI apps that actually do the coding for you. So no one no longer creates these codes, but AI now is doing the coding. So we're moving at a very rapid pace. So it's very important that one looks at the careers of the future and aligns their career prospects to the careers of the future and to the demands of technology as well. This is my last slide. There's an exercise that I want you guys to do, and just to look at your options. And this will help you, especially grade 10s, 11s, and 12s, in terms of how life is going to look like after high school. So I call it the 5 versus 5 rule, where you choose 5 universities and you choose 5 qualifications that you want to get into. You list those qualifications. You list the universities first. You list the desired course that you want to get into. You list the APS of those requirements, and then you list your APS, and then you rate it. You rate the university. Which one is your first option? Which one is your second option? Your third option? Your fourth option? And your fifth option? Then you look at pros and cons of all of those 5 universities, right? And you cross-reference. So you cross-reference how medicine will look like at University of Venda versus at Wits University. You cross-reference how occupational therapy looks like at University of Pretoria versus UCT. You cross-reference how medicine looks like at Sefako Magato versus WITS versus UCT, so that you can align your options, so that you can see what best works for you, so that when you do your applications, you have more of an idea of what it is that you want and how you're going to be able to get there. And that is it from my side. I felt like I've been talking for forever. I hope though that I've left some gems and there are some nuggets that you can pick up from what I have said. And I wish you guys all the best for the future. And yeah, thank you so much to Future Global Leaders for having me. I hope I have delivered on my mandate. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. So, Sandisiwe, more than delivered on your mandate. Your 45 minutes went by so quickly, so informative, and such critical information that you shared with us. I just want to go to the chat box and see if there's any question directly that I may have missed. Also, if anyone has a question that wants to put up their hand while I go through the chat box, please do. And Mr. Sandisiwe will ask you to put on your mic when she sees your hand up. There's a question here from Ulundi Sipo asking, if I don't make the cutoff for a certain course, can I reapply with better results and still be accepted in that course?
So, look, a dream denied is never a dream. A dream delayed is never a dream denied, and I always say this. So, what usually happens is that if you know that you've been denied, choose the second best that you know will be able to articulate you into that qualification. For example, if you want to do medicine and you don't meet you meet the requirements but you don't meet the cutoff. Now, again, at the university I work at, the cutoff, for example, this year for medicine was sitting at an average of about 86%. So if you've got anything below 86%, you didn't make the cut. So what we advise students to do is that to take something that will later articulate you into medicine. So you can take a BSc, for example, in physics. What that BSc does is that it allows you to go into an MPC-HB, right? Provided that you obviously meet certain requirements as well. If you want to go into engineering and you don't get into engineering, look at going into town planning or look at going into architecture, because that is in one faculty and you've got better options for you to be able to move from that qualification to the other qualification. So it's always easier to move within one faculty than cross faculties. So that's my advice. My advice would be, when you do your application, always also apply for something that you can fall back on. If the dream is to go into actual sciences and you know that the stakes are high, apply for an economics, a BCom economics, apply for BCom accounting sciences, so that you know that you can later, given the opportunity, move into that particular qualification. Yes, it will take longer, but again, a dream delayed is never a dream denied.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And then one is more of a peer pressure level question. And one of your tips is to avoid peer pressure in deciding what career you want and where to study and that sort of thing, and just aligning with your passion and practicality in terms of what your skill set is. Now, there's a question about, what about pressure from the parents? I know what I want and I know that I'm more than capable of achieving it, but then how do you go about dealing with the pressure from family members that constantly pressure you to do a certain career, like medicine, because that's seen as one that will guarantee success? Was it wiser to listen to them, or do you just follow your own passions?
It's a very difficult one. And in many cases, you find that the parents are the ones footing the bill. So you do what they say you must do. But I think also making your family understand where you are coming from and being reasonable in what it is that you want. And also showing your parents and your family that you are capable of going into something. So I'll give you an example. My nephew is currently doing classical music at Stellenbosch. And now, being a person that I am in this particular industry, I was like, we are here at Stellenbosch to do this. There's no future for this in South Africa. And it took me actually doing some research to find that he can actually progress and do well in this particular field, not in South Africa, but internationally. So on the global stage is where this thing is bigger. So it's also for you to do your research as the person who is going to actually live this reality, because it's not your mom's reality, it's not your dad's reality, it's It's not your aunt's or your granny's reality. It's going to be your reality. But you also need to take the responsibility of showing them that you can actually do well in that particular qualification that you want to do.
I love that. And one final question, which I knew was going to come up when you did your slide on careers of the future. A lot of these FGLers are business science aspirant students, so looking to go into accounting, wanting to be CAs, wanting to be actuaries and that sort of thing. It wasn't listed as one of your careers of the future. Are there permutations where this is still essential in the next 10, 15 years, accountancy and the likes?
So the thing is, my take on this thing about careers of the future is that all careers are still equally important. And I'll tell you why. If there's an app that can actually do the accounting formula, there needs to be someone who can build that app. There needs to be a panel that brings expertise in building that particular app. So so for me, it's not to say that accounting is not a career of the future. Yes, there's going to be it might not look the same in terms of what accounting is currently. There might be a lot of adaptations. There might be a lot of AI that goes into accounting, but we must always remember that there are people, there's physical beings that are needed to build these systems. There are physical people who need to apply their knowledge into these systems. There are people who need to maintain these systems. So it's very important to say the human factor will always be required.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sandisiwe, thank you so much. I think the last few questions, there was one on I have many choices in terms of what I want to be. And I'd like to refer you to that 5 versus 5 rule chart that you had. I don't know if you mind going back to that slide, just in terms of weighing up all your options and doing a balance of scales and trying to figure out which one suits you best. I think that will then answer that question for the learner that asked that. So I think you had a column where you were listing the 5 universities and then the top 5 career choices.
Let me just go back. So yeah, so the 5 versus 5 rule. Basically, that is what and how it looks like. This will really help you in terms of making that decision and also looking at those options. Now, this is something that if you're currently in grade 11, if you're currently in grade 10, this is something that you should do now. By the time you get to grade 12, this is something that must be your Bible. You know exactly where your applications are going to go to. So yeah, this is my 5 versus 5 rule.
Thank you so much. So Sandisiwe, your expertise and your insights and your experience, we truly appreciate you. You have been such a gem of an addition to this webinar. Enkosi kakhulu for your time. Wishing you all of the best as you pursue your MBA candidacy. I know lots of research and late hours go into that. We trust that you will do super well.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me this evening.